The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome everybody to the Centre Standardisation Training for Hospitality, Food and Beverage Services. My name's Dan White. I work in the Quality Assurance team and I sit in Guilds. I'll be facilitating the meeting and moving the slides and documents around. I'm here with Miriam Garstang, who is the Principal Moderator for this qualification. So just very briefly, this is obviously part of the additional support that City and Guilds are offering to centres delivering our technical qualifications. The purpose of the meeting really is to give you a sort of best practice and advice about it, or to aid your internal standardisation meetings. So you should have already received some materials prior to this meeting which you had a chance to mark, and Miriam will then talk through a sort of commentary for those materials, and there'll be some general sort of support and guidance as well from myself. There will also be an opportunity to ask questions. It's written questions only, so you don't need microphones or anything like that. As you can see, there's a question box in the bottom right hand corner. If there are any issues with sound or technical issues that you're having, please write a question into that box and we'll see that. So if there is any issues, it all looks like it's fine from our end, sort of sound wise, so please do let us know. Like I say, there will be a chance for you to write questions at a specific moment, but if you do sort of think of them as you're listening and want to note them down in the question box, that's fine as well. We will then try and answer as many as we can today, and if there are any that we need to take away and answer, we will do that. You will get kind of written copies of all responses anyway as part of this webinar, along with a recording of today and the copy of the slides that we work through. So hopefully that is all clear enough. Like I say, standardisation is very important with the marking of the synoptic assessment. When you've got multiple markers, more than one marker, it's really important that everyone is marking to a consistent standard. That way you're likely to avoid any issues coming up with moderation and possible adjustments being made to marks. If all of your markers are basically on the same page, then that should help with that. So it's a really, really important thing for centres to get their heads around and to undertake, and hopefully today will help you with that. So really that's all from me. I will hand over to Miriam and then I will pop up at the end to do some sort of wrapping up. As I say, any questions at all, please just put them in the box on the right hand side, and I will hand you to Miriam now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just to reiterate the objectives for this afternoon. Firstly, to explain the justification marks that were on the sample materials by the Principal Moderator. I will point out it's the exemplar synoptic assessment that was completed, and it will also highlight good practice in the use of City and Guilds documents. Also to facilitate a standardisation activity and to remind you of the typical activities recommended for internal standardisation. So to start with, what we're going to actually have a look at is the actual task brief, what the candidates were asked to do. So the actual assignment task for this 610330 was to plan and organise an event, and in the sample materials it was with a fundraising element to it. The candidate would be responsible for planning and then implementing the event and evaluating it. Now these materials, as I'm sure you've seen, they don't actually have the evaluation element in them, but you can still see how marks have been awarded. So for task one, the candidates were asked to design a targeted marketing campaign for the event they've been allocated, produce a delivery plan outlining the service details, costings and resources required, justifying your decisions. Now the costings, it's really important here that candidates understand they're doing the costings for a front of house activity. They do not have to cost out the menus. We had candidates last year that went into great deals in on the side of costing menus, but you'll see in a moment in the example the type of thing that we're really looking for. Then to produce a staff briefing that can be used for the event, and also to think about contingencies, think about what could go wrong and how they will deal with it. Once they've done all their planning, they then need to be actually running the event. So for the practical element, this is where they actually have to have control of setting up, running the event, supervising their team, and using the documentation they've prepared in task 1. So all the documentation for the plans, they should be evident when they're actually running their event. And if they're then using them as working documents, those should be the final ones that are submitted. It does say about photographs as one of the elements to include. We only really need photographs if they are of value. It's good to have a picture of the room layout and setup. It does actually state in the briefs about having a picture of the person that's supervising and in action, that it's really the relevance of that. You just need to be able to see that they're looking professional, and there aren't really many other photographs that warrant being included for this particular assessment. And then finally, they have to evaluate it's really evaluating from the planning stage right the way through, including all the practical elements. And again, on this one, it's making sure they're evaluating the front of house elements. We had a few people last year that there was a huge focus on the quality of the food. That's only a very small element. So we do need to make sure they're evaluating their performance as a supervisor, their planning activities, and generally having a look at the event. Do they work within budget? Did they meet their targets if they were looking at specific revenue? So the actual evaluations were slightly weak last year. Okay, so we're now going to move on to some of the documentation. On page 33 of the sample pack that you had, you will see there's a declaration of authenticity. Now, this, along with other documents, is new for this year. And on this document, there's a new box added at the bottom, which is where you identify if the candidates received any additional support. So the candidate signs it to say it's their work, the tutor signs it to confirm, and then at the very bottom, there's the section where it says, has the candidate received any additional support in the production of this work? If they have, then details of that need to be given. So that element I'm just bringing to your attention as it is an addition for this year. Going on to the following page, which is the practical observation form. Now this is a key, it's a critical piece of evidence that the centre observer produces during the practical performance. This, if it's completed well, will bring the performance to life. As you know, the moderator will not be present during the practical, so it's important that this document is as descriptive as possible. Observers should describe how well the candidate performed against each assessment objective. The band descriptors should not be used, but they should be used, as a guide, but when marking, but not be copied verbatim. And then that will actually help the marker and the moderator to allocate suitable marks. Just to re-emphasise there, it's really important, the descriptiveness, the richness of the evidence that you're writing here. It's not any good if you just put the candidate was good. You need to say why, or if they were excellent, why. You have to really be descriptive and make sure that your descriptions match the wording of the bandings when we come to that later. You need to really be making sure that it's clear to the moderator how well they performed, because this is the one element that isn't seen. all the documentation for task 1 and task 3, we see the moderators will see that. They'll be able to read and look at that. But the actual practical element, apart from possibly one candidate that's seen on the moderation visit, will not be seen. So it's really important that the wording on this practical observation form is very, very clear. It may be beneficial just to write a narrative when you're observing and not try and match everything to the assessment objectives. Don't get too tied up trying to match it all. It may be easier to do that afterwards. I just want to bring your attention to just to reinforce that the notes just at the top. It says detailed, accurate and differentiating notes which identify areas of strength and weaknesses are necessary to distinguish between different quality of performance and to facilitate accurate allocation of marks once all evidence has been submitted. So that's where we really need to see the difference between a high performing candidate and one that hasn't performed as well. The next document that we have is the candidate record form. With all these forms, they can be handwritten or they can be typed up. It's entirely up to you. But if they are handwritten, please can you make sure handwriting is legible, as that's really important for moderation process. So the candidate record form is a key piece of evidence, and again it's new this year. The new forms are supplied in the assessment pages on the website for each qualification. Care should be taken to ensure that the marks along the top of each AO relate specifically to the qualification that you're assessing, as they do differ. So on this one, it's shaded. You have for AO1 you have a total of 9 marks. 1 to 3 are in band 1, 4 to 6 are in band 2, and 7 to 9 are in band 3. They're not pass merit distinction marks, they are just bands. And then when you go on to AO2, there's a total of 12 marks, and again, it's split between the 3 bands. And you'll see with the actual detail of what's put, this page actually does summarise the whole assessment. So it's looking at AO1 across task 1, 2 and 3, whereas the previous document we looked at was just for the practical. So on this particular page, it actually does say, it comments about the detailed planning of all stages of the event, drawing on the breadth of knowledge that's been supported with the depth of knowledge in the implementation and evaluation stages of the assessment. Clear, precise documentation in the form of checklists and briefing notes, further illustrated level of knowledge. So you can see it's actually worded to show that 8 marks have been justified, but we'll be looking more at the marks in a moment. So just to look at the assessment tasks that the candidate was completing for this assignment. If we go back to page 15, next one. That's it. Page 15. Now that really gives a clear indication of what the event brief was for this particular candidate. It was a dinner for a squash club, the date, what time they were arriving, what time they were sitting down, and the finish time. 30 customers numbers were 30, including 3 vegetarians. The price per head and what it covered. And then additional requirements for this event, table plan, 6 tables of 6, fundraising activity, outlined what was there, and then the special requirements at the bottom. So that's really clear for a moderator to see what the brief was for the candidate, and then to see how they went about completing all the tasks relevant to this event. On the next page, the candidates actually outlined the documentation, why they've used certain documentation. So it forms part of their justification. They have gone through all the documents they've produced and commented on them. This could have been in a little bit more depth, but they have at least gone through and commented and explained the different elements of their plans they've produced. For the actual bookings, this particular page showed in detail the bookings that they had, the table numbers and the special requests for the customers, who wanted to sit with who. So there was a lot of detail actually there that would inform the way they were setting up the room and the menu requirements. So that if you're using college standardised documentation, that's fine, but if the candidate wants to produce their own, then they shouldn't be restricted. But you need to make sure that they are showing the detail they're working from. The next page was the menu. And again, here it's really important that the candidates don't feel they've got to produce the menu. As with any event, it would normally be the client expressing their wishes or selecting a menu, and then it's the chef that actually produces the menu. So if there are special requirements for this event or for the candidates' events they're doing, then that should be communicated with the chef, but the students aren't, or the candidates aren't expected to write the menu themselves. So here this particular event had 4-course meal with tea and coffee, and this document shows the way the candidate was going to be presenting the menu to the customers on the evening. And they also had the allergen sheet to support the menu, which is a requirement today, showing the different allergens they'd identified. But again, this would be done in conjunction with the kitchen and used as a document to inform customers of the content of all the different menu items. They then produced a resource list, and this particular candidate produced a list for physical and human resources. So they identified the different areas. The physical resources, I think you agree, is quite a detailed list of all the equipment, cutlery, crockery, glassware they needed. And if they're doing a physical resource list like that, it can actually help when they come to do a checklist later on. So again, they'd really thought about what they're going to need for this event, what sort of quantities, and produced the list accordingly. Table plan. Table plan meets what the customer was asking for, showing how the rooms would be set out, the table numbers to help allocating which customers will sit where the bar would be situated, cloakroom facility, etc. So it's very clear how they plan for the room to look. And then on the evening, if there were any contingencies or any changes they had to make, it wouldn't matter if they wouldn't have to reproduce a document like this, but they could just annotate on it, change it, and then that's the working document that can be included. On to the next one, we've got the roles and responsibilities. And again, remember this is them planning. So they're planning for 1 bar person, 2 wine waiters and 6 waiters. And there's an outline of what their responsibilities would be. Once they come to be running the event, they may add again to this list. They may sort of make more specific changes to it if there are details that come to light. But for task 1, looking at it does show that they know what they're looking to actually, or what they need to do to actually run this type of event. As with the order of service, they've gone through from 6:30 through till the 10 o'clock, outlining what will be happening at what times. And we all know that times sometimes don't stick to plan, but at least they've thought it through, the sort of time allocation that they would be looking to adhere to. And again, that will actually help with the running of the evening, help it flow. The briefing notes, the candidates actually gone through identifying what they would cover in their briefing, and identified with the health and safety, there's no disabled access requested, no planned fire alarms. They'll check, understand the roles and responsibilities with their staff, and the allocation of tables. So again, this document, the briefing notes, could easily be added to on the evening, but they are showing the type of information that should be included in a briefing. We had some candidates last year that did PowerPoint presentations for their briefings. It's not really required, because in a normal restaurant situation, a briefing would be a verbal briefing. If I know, again, some markers and centres did a video recording of the briefing. Now, it's not necessary to upload that, because it should be in the practical observation notes what the candidate did as part of their briefing and how thorough it was. Onto the costing page. And as you'll see here, the candidate was told they had a 27% food cost. Guests were paying £40 a head. So if you've got your total revenue expected for the meal, and then this candidate identified the actual overall cost of food, tablecloths, lipcloths, napkins, and the other pieces of equipment that would come into the costs. They'd also worked out a staffing cost, just to show they've identified the costs, they know what their income's going to be just for the meal, and then they actually show the profit they're making. Again, this wouldn't include any bar take, and if candidates are predicting that, then again it all can come through in their evaluation as to how they've actually made money on the evening, and if it's a positive or if it's not as much as they'd expected. The next document is the checklist, and so this is very much shows organisational skills. So it's looking at what things need to be checked and what sort of timeline for the pre-event planning and also for the setting up on the day. And this enables the candidate to tick when it's been completed, put any comments about any issues they've identified or if they need to recheck anything. And so it does actually demonstrate their skills. So it would be expected that with the evidence uploaded, this document would be completed and not just a blank template. We then have the risk assessment. With the risk assessment, it's fine for candidates to use, because most centres do have a risk assessment for their restaurants, and it's fine for them to use that, but they should also be given the opportunity to add to it. If they want to do their own, then that's fine, but if they are using a set risk assessment document for centres, then they should actually make sure that it covers everything that's going to be happening for their service, and is there anything they need to add on to it. Contingency plan. It's really for the candidates to identify anything that could go wrong and what they do about it. So there's some typical things here, like additional vegetarian requests, late cancellations, unnotified dietary requirements. The one thing this candidate didn't include was any sort of staff shortages or staff not turning up, going sick on the day, which could have been included, and I'm sure there are other contingencies as well that candidates will come up with. So it's just showing that they are sort of thinking about what could go wrong and how they would deal with it, rather than just going into a panic on the service. And as this particular assessment required them to come up with a fundraising activity, the candidates actually put what their proposed activity was. It was a silent auction. They have justified why they were doing that in the pages earlier, and they've outlined how it will run, and they will also look at sponsorship from suppliers for commodities being used to produce the menu and donate money to the club. So, you know, they've come up with a couple of ideas there, but this assessment is very much about the supervision and leadership side of it. And the fundraising was just another activity to give it a bit of a theme. Marketing campaign. For this particular one, the candidates produced a poster and said where the posters will be displayed, saying it will be advertised on the Squash Club restaurant website and the restaurant websites, and they'll also post some tweets. So the actual poster is over the page on the next page, but they have come up with marketing relevant for this type of event. And I know a lot of candidates, when they do their assessments, they will be using college websites. If it's a private event, then it's about thinking about how they can support the organiser to actually promote that event, to show they know different ways of marketing. Okay, right, we're going to go back now to the slides.
Just quickly to say, I've seen we've got a couple of questions. Don't worry, we're not ignoring them. We'll pick them up at the questions section. So yeah, back to Miriam.
Right, we're now going to look at the justification of marks, and this is a page that everyone really needs to be very familiar with to identify the descriptors in the 3 bands. So band 1 on the knowledge section, it's looking at the candidate's work. It was structured, lacked description in terms of legislation, financial costing and event planning. So they came up with some information, but not very thorough. Whereas this particular candidate was awarded, they were awarded 8 out of 9 marks, as the recall is strong and weaves through the tasks. To achieve maximum marks, the candidate could have shown more detail in some areas of the planning, e.g. contingencies, to demonstrate their level of recall of knowledge in event planning. If we relate this to the band descriptor, we can see that the justification comments make reference to the bands, but do not copy the wording without also suggesting areas in the piece where knowledge is shown. So we've got detailed planning of all stages of the event, drawing on a breadth of knowledge that has been supported with a depth of knowledge in the implementation and evaluation stages of the assessment. Clear, precise documentation in the form of checklists, briefing notes, further illustrated the level of knowledge. So it's quite a succinct statement there, but it does actually meet that higher band descriptor, produce detailed work that demonstrated in-depth knowledge across the qualification, including all relevant aspects of the event that would potentially impact on its success, such as risk assessment and timelines. So, I think you'll agree that does match with the actual band 3 descriptor. But this candidate didn't get full marks, they were 1 mark off. The next area, which is the understanding, 12 marks are available here, and this candidate achieved 9, so they were just into band 3. So looking at the understanding, it does come through all 3 elements of all 3 tasks of this assignment or this assessment. In the higher band, where this candidate's actually been awarded, candidate understood the concepts behind planning and managing a successful event, which I think is clear in the documentation they've produced. They understood and put theory into practice for all of the components required to ensure the successful running of an event. So that's where it's really important that those practical observation notes support that last part of the statement. Now, the comment that was actually put onto the candidate record form was an excellent understanding of the requirements to plan and implement a successful event has been shown through all stages. Articulate explanations were used to support instructions, which demonstrated depth of understanding. Justifications were, in the main, sound, but on occasions could have been supported with more reasoned decision. So hence the additional marks, they were not awarded. For the AO3, this is the actual practical element. So this is where it draws on that practical observation sheet. It's making sure that that candidate has demonstrated the supervisory skills whilst monitoring the quality and quantity of products, staff issues, timings and logistics in order to ensure the smooth running. Now, that's not going to be seen through any paperwork that they've been doing. It is far more sort of watching them do it. The candidate supervised and monitored the service at all times to ensure standards of customer service, food and beverage service were controlled. They identified any potential problems and, where possible, took preventative action. It's really important on this qualification that the candidates, if they see something that needs doing, they don't necessarily jump in and do it themselves. They are supervising their team, so they should be instructing their team. They don't have to do everything themselves. Pre, during and after the event, the health and safety and security of staff, visitors, contractors and customers was monitored, so that's the health and safety element. Candidate liaise with other departments, so it's important they liaise with the kitchen throughout service. All areas were cleaned and cleared, so it is important that they follow this right through to the very end. So this person, they actually had a very professional approach, was shown in leading and supervising the team to deliver a high standard of customer service. They remained calm throughout and instilled confidence in the team whilst ensuring standards were being met. Although concentration diminished with some team members at the end of service, this only resulted in slight delays to the clearing down stages. A good command of communication skills was apparent. The correct level of communication was maintained with the customer to ensure they were kept informed and to check satisfaction levels. When liaising with other departments, verbal communication was used. If this was supported by written information, it would help to avoid misunderstandings. So again, 12 out of 15, but they did actually demonstrate that they sit comfortably in that band 3. And just another comment on that, on the practical element. It's showing they've got strong leadership and supervisory skills, but the thing to remember that this qualification is not a licence to practice, and marks cannot be removed for aspects which may be considered professional or industry expectations. Looking at the weighting, which is 30% in this case, that will guide you as to the importance of practical skills, which compared to job-ready qualifications is quite low. So this is very much a holistic qualification and it's not just based on their practical. Okay, on to AO4. So this is where they are assessed on bringing it all together. So how have they brought it from the planning stages right through to the implementation? And what we're looking for is that they're actually using a wide range of knowledge from across the qualification when researching, analysing and presenting data. There's an integration of knowledge and understanding and skills used to plan, run and evaluate a complex event efficiently. Candidate created original and detailed event plan, briefing notes. All evidence presented was well detailed and comprehensive. And the candidate used a wide range of communication methods throughout all stages of the event. So again, they're actually showing they understand the whole of this qualification, and they're drawing on all the different units. With this particular area, there is the top band description as well. So that's actually showing you that if they are in the top band, as our candidate's sort of 12, so they don't really fit into this one. Candidate utilised a wide range of knowledge from across the qualification when researching, analysing and presenting pre-event planning, marketing campaign and supervising the event. They were able to demonstrate knowledge and understanding and skills across the topics, allowing them to plan, run and evaluate an event. They planned, ran and evaluated the event coherently by integrating creativity, knowledge, understanding and skills. So, they did do it, but not to the higher level. So the comment on this one, they demonstrated excellent ability when putting theory into practice to implement plans. There were some elements where adjustments were made. Careful consideration was shown as to how they impacted on the event. Organisational skills enabled them to a clear vision for the event and how goals were to be achieved. Although a creative approach was shown, it's important to consider alternative strategies that may be required due to staff shortages or contingencies that may be required. It's evident that extensive research was carried out prior to planning the event, which paid off and ensured that the work was within the budget whilst meeting the client brief. To gain full marks on this one, we would really be looking for a slightly higher level thinking and analysis to be evident in the documents they've produced or in the written elements they've produced. And on to AO5, attending to detail. Now here it is looking at not just the detail on the night, but or on the lunchtime, it's about the detail in their planning, in their documentation. So the candidate produced, this is what we're looking for, candidate produced a detailed delivery plan, including all resource requirements to include staff, large and small equipment, food and beverage, specialised supplies, e.g. decorations, stages, audio visual. The event plan was accurate. So I think you'll agree the actual resource list was quite extensive. Candidate kept accurate information on customer details and requirements. So again, they met that. Also completed documentation on sales, breakages, stock, drinks, complimentary items, staff hours, complaints. Again, that would come out more in the evaluation. And that's why it's really important that any documents that are created through the event are actually submitted as evidence and referred to in their evaluations. Candidate executed the event to the plan, and when unexpected issues arose, they were dealt with efficiently. The quality of the service and delivery of products met client expectations. So that's where customer feedback comes in, and it's really important that that's used. Candidate produced evidence from the event which was analysed, interpreted and evaluated effectively, identifying areas for improvement. So the comment for this particular candidate, they showed a keen eye for detail, ensuring the preparations for the event met exacting standards and that all resources were available and utilised efficiently. Through leading the team by example, Sophie was able to ensure the client brief was met and the standards achieved. Remember, some team members may need more support than others and additional instructions. So that was just one of the comments that where more marks could have been given. That's sort of gone through the justification. I hope you agree with the marks that have been allocated. What we're going to do now is go on to the question section. So I'll hand you back to Dan.
Yep. So yeah, hopefully that you found that useful. To compare Miriam's kind of commentary along with your own marks. We're going to take a couple of minutes. We've got a few questions coming in. We've had it already. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to note down any questions you can think of relating to the synoptic assignment and marking and standardisation. If you put them in the question box on the right-hand corner, we will take a moment to read through them and try and answer the ones that we can today. As I say, anything we need to take away, we will do. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes. We'll mute ourselves on the microphone so you won't hear us. And yeah, please just take this opportunity to ask any questions at all. Okay, hello everyone. Some questions have come in. Please do feel free to carry on typing while we start answering some of them if you're still thinking of them. So the first we have is just to clarify, both the observation form and the candidate record form have to be completed. The observation form is just to record practical evidence, and the candidate record form is to capture all evidence for the whole assessment. So that's just someone asking if that's correct.
Yes, that is correct. The practical observation form is what you're completing when they're actually running their event, and then that feeds into the candidate record form, which also has comments relating to task 1 and task 3, and that applies with all qualifications in hospitality and catering. Most of them have to do a planning activity, and then the actual practical, and then the evaluation. And so you use the practical observation for task. The practical task, I won't say a number because they vary, and then it all feeds into the candidate record, and both are uploaded to the portal for moderation.
Yeah, so we've just got another question relating to that, and I think Miriam's just answered that. Is the candidate record form used during the assessment and practical record form later? And it's the other way around.
Yeah.
So the practical observation form is for while you're undertaking the practical assessment. The candidate record form is a kind of summation of all of the overall performance which you submit. So yeah, it's the other way around.
You might want to, on the candidate record form, when you're marking task 1, you might want to start putting some comments in, and then you do the practical. So you're actually building up on that candidate record form as you go through, but then your final decisions once they've completed all 3 tasks.
Okay, we've got another question. This one's about the actual webinars. It says, is there a similar webinar for level 3 professional cookery?
The aim of these was that the actual process, the standardisation, the marking process is the same across all qualifications. So currently there aren't plans for a specific one for professional cookery, but you can apply the information, particularly from the planning stage, the cookery they do. The cookery, they will still have the practical observation forms filled in. So the process is the same all the way through them.
Yeah, and I should say we'll get to it on the resources and support slide that's coming up, but you are able to also ask specific questions if you have them about sort of some of the content. You can send that to our technical moderation support team, and we'll get back to you. So if there is anything specific about tasks, then yeah, you can write to us. Next question: if a candidate has to receive support during the assessment, can they still score marks in the high band? So I think it very much depends what we're talking about with support. If we're talking about access arrangements, so the kind of support where candidates are not, maybe need a scribe or an amanuensis or something similar, or a reader possibly, then those need to be applied for, obviously, and once approved, then that's fine. That wouldn't, having that kind of support would not prohibit someone getting high band marks, because those access arrangements are very much in place to sort of level the playing field for candidates who may otherwise be disadvantaged. But beyond that, I'm not sure sort of what support we would really be talking about, because I don't think that during a task, assessors or tutors should be supporting the candidate beyond what we don't want is anything that could be misconstrued as aiding them or potentially sort of helping them, advantaging them against other candidates. So I think if you've got a specific example of the support that you mean that isn't that, then maybe let us know. You can always follow it up either here or with an email for further clarification. Apologies if I haven't quite got what you were talking about there, but yeah, really we sort of stray away from encouraging support beyond, the task brief should outline really the kind of conditions for the assessment to take place, and beyond that you have to be very careful with the kind of support for candidates. Next question: can the candidates use pre-designed templates, i.e. risk assessments, food safety records, time plans, etc.?
Yes, they can. There's no reason why they can't use those. But we do say that if they want to design their own, then they shouldn't be prevented from doing so, because again, that shows slightly higher level candidate. But if they are using risk assessments, then they have to relate to the actual service that they're doing. Food safety records, all those things, yes, it's fine, but it's making sure that any amendments or additions are made so that it does relate specifically to their allocated event.
Okay, we've got another question. It was accidentally split in two, so I'm going to stitch it together, and hopefully that makes sense. So all our learners have done mock lunches and have all this documentation, and also created drink menus in addition. Our menu covers allergens on it. Do they have to have a separate sheet for customers like the one shown?
No, they do, as long as, because it's a legislative requirement now regarding allergens, it's about how they actually show they've got that information and they're supporting customer choice through it. So if it's all included on the menu, then that's fine. But it was just an example of how it could be actually displayed. You're saying they've actually done a mock session, so they presumably that's to familiarise them with the sort of documents they need. Now they would, when they come in to do the actual task one in the set time, you know, they would be creating the documents for their specific event. So I'm not quite sure why the drink menus being produced, but again, if you're looking to include a drink into the cost of the meal that they're doing, then there's no reason why, because that's part of their marketing strategy, promoting increasing sales. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, just to say, if anyone sort of requires further clarification, that we will send out written responses, but we really do encourage you to submit questions after the fact if need be. And the final question we sort of already answered. It was one about the candidate record forms and practical observation forms. So I think unless any more questions come in, I'll move on to the next slide, just to wrap up really. I won't go through this slide, but this slide has a reminder of the kind of typical activities that centres would undertake during internal standardisation to help make for very effective sessions. This information will be shared with you. These slides will be shared, so you can take some time to work through those. And there is additional information on standardisation in a document I'm going to come to later. But yeah, this takes some time maybe to have a look at that when we send those through. The final thing I want to talk about is support and resources beyond obviously this webinar. We have our technical pages, the Sitting Guild's technical pages on our website. I've got this up here now. So we have, no, I'm in the wrong place, excuse me. So technicals and tech back. For technical qualifications, there is just got a quick follow-up from that question. Yes, mock lunch was done so they can put into practice what they have designed in theory and try to work on the timing ready for the real thing. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so technical qualifications, these pages contain an awful lot of information that will be very beneficial to you, so you should bookmark these. In particular, resources and support, if you click on that, there's a number of documents and guidance materials that really will be essential to help you deliver and assess your qualifications. We've got a welcome pack, a checklist, various things like that. However, for this particular for standardisation, marking, moderation, I think the marking and moderation guide is an absolute essential document. So hopefully you are already using this and are familiar with it, but if not, then click on that and download yourself a copy. It's got obviously lots of information about the marking process for centres, then the moderation process that we undertake and the outcomes of that. And there is specific information about internal standardisation in there, which will help you. So that has kind of some information for you that really is worth reading through. So as well as the resources and support, we have, I mentioned them earlier, the technicals and moderation support team. Their contact details are here, and obviously that's in all our documentation as well. They are specifically to help centres delivering our technical qualifications, and that will be sort of administrative guidance, anything you want really. But also, if you do have qualification specific queries, you can send it to them, and they will sort of contact the relevant team and get your response. So anything that has come out of today, or anything really about the sort of process that you want further clarification on, that's your first point of call, I would say. And then finally, we have a qualification report which is produced for all of our technical qualifications, and I think I'll just show you where that is. So if you, on the qualification specific pages, so putting in 6103, which is for this qualification, takes you to our qualification specific page for the technical qualifications. If you go to the documents section, level 3, we have in the assessment materials, go to past papers, and the qualification report will be there. And just following up on something Miriam said earlier, if you look in the assessment materials here, you can see that we have the synoptic recording forms, and that is the candidate record form, practical observation form, and anything else that may be relevant for the qualification. For 2018, they have changed, we have updated them. We've hopefully made them a bit clearer and easier to use, but also we've actually removed some unnecessary assessment objectives. So really just make sure you are using those forms and not previous year's forms, because it could cause problems for you if you've got the wrong form. So we really do encourage you make sure you have the 2018 versions, and they are version controlled, and you should be able to see that. And just to talk about the qualification report is...
Yeah, just a couple of points relating to the 6103 last year. It was in the actual report, it does say this, but the interpretation of the brief by centres was varied, and in some cases did not appear to adhere to the guidance or task instructions. So it's really important that centres understand the requirements of the brief and don't sort of deviate from it. The uploading of evidence was not always complete, and numerous individual documents were uploaded by some centres. So really, we're not looking for any drafts. We're not looking for several versions of the same document. We just need final documents. And I think there's been some specific instructions this year about actually either scanning them into a PDF document, but also making sure they're all the right way up, because that was the other thing last year. They were on their side, upside down, just to help with the actual moderation process. And the final comment I'm just going to pull out from the synoptic. A number of centres now have commercial managers that operate the restaurants, and that's fine, but we do need to make sure that candidates are not actually stopped from supervising, from actually completing the assessment as it should be done. They can liaise with the restaurant manager, but the restaurant manager really does have to step back for these assessments and not intervene at all, because there was one candidate last year in her evaluation who did comment on that, which is slightly unfair on the candidate. Just a final thing, when you're looking at the hospitality and catering qualifications, we have this year the combined 7178, which is the food preparation and service. With that qualification, it is still just the 1 mark at the end, but there will be 2 practical assessments. There will be the cooking side and there will be the service side, and that will inevitably be carried out by 2 different markers. So it is going to be really important that when those marks are brought together, there's 1 candidate record form submitted. There will be 2 practical observation sheets, 1 for service, 1 for the cookery side, but the overall candidate record form will be 1 document that brings together the final performance, but relating to the 2 areas. And again, separate assessors, as I've said. So I think that's all.
Yeah,
I've just
wanted to say that I've been reminded that basically it's just to clarify, it's all the synoptic assessment recording forms have been updated. It's not just this qualification. So for all the other sort of hospitality quals, that is true as well. So for example, 6100, that those synoptic recording documents have been updated. So just to say, for all technical qualifications, they've been amended. So make sure that for everything you're using the 2018 versions, not just this qualification, in case that wasn't clear. And yeah, no, apart from that, I think we are probably at an end. Quite neatly, we've come in at just an hour. That's good. I'm pleased with that. Hopefully you found this useful. I really kind of reinforce the message that we should, if you have any follow-up questions, if anything you want to ask them, please do contact the technical moderation support team. We will get you our responses. as soon as we can. We're going to send, just to reiterate, we'll send out these slides. The recording will be available from this session, will be available on the website. I can't promise we're going to edit out any of my ums and ahs, but we'll see what we can do. So that will be available on the website, and we will forward written responses to all the questions we've received, as well to all the attendees, so you have it in writing. And that gives us a chance to just really make sure that we're sort of 100% comfortable with what we've said to you as well. So that will come out following this session. Other than that, good luck with your internal standardisation and with just the marking in general for this year. And I hope you found this useful.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And I look forward to meeting some of you on visits.